The biggest limit that we're running into may be that we're running out of atmosphere into which to put the waste products of our society, particularly the carbon dioxide that's the ubiquitous byproduct of burning fossil fuel. You burn coal or oil or gas, you get CO2, and the atmosphere is now filling up with it. We know what the solutions for dealing with this trouble are. Many of the technologies we need to get off fossil fuel and onto something else. The thing that's preventing us from doing it is the enormous political power wielded by those who have made and are making vast windfall profits off of fossil fuel.
Well, there have been a lot of efforts by scientists to try to estimate whether we are living sustainably in the sense of whether we're consuming planetary resources at a rate that can be continued. The threat that this combination of climate change, water shortages, food shortages, and rising energy prices is enormously troubling to anybody who's aware of the data and the way these issues could play out.
You can't keep increasing your economy infinitely on a finite planet. One of the things that humanity is facing is the need to dramatically reduce its carbon footprint over the next 40 years. And we're talking in the wealthy countries about 80 to 90% reductions.
We're no longer at the point of trying to stop global warming too late for that. We're at the point of trying to keep it from becoming a complete and utter calamity. We shouldn't have to be here tonight. If the world worked in a kind of rational way, we shouldn't have to be here. 25 years ago, our scientists started telling us about climate change. I played my small role in that by writing the first book about all this in 1989 for a general audience, a book called The End of Nature. If the world worked as it should, our leaders would have heeded those warnings, gone to work, done the sensible things that at the time would have been enough to get us a long way where we needed to go. They didn't, and that's why we're in the fix we're in.
This is the biggest emergency the human family has faced since it came out of the caves. There is nothing bigger.
All these issues matter, immigration and healthcare and education, but this one is really about the physical change of the planet.
We all have been saying we need to save the planet. But as I think about it, the planet's going to be around for some time to come. What's at stake now is civilization itself.
Our most important climatologist, Jim Hansen, had his team at NASA do a study to figure out how much carbon in the atmosphere was too much. The paper they published, maybe the most important scientific paper of the millennia to date, said we now know enough to know how much is too much. Any value for carbon in the atmosphere greater than 350 parts per million is not compatible with the planet on which civilization developed and to which life on Earth is adapted. That's pretty strong language for scientists to use. Stronger still if you know that outside today, the atmosphere is 395 parts per million CO2 and rising about 2 parts per million per year. Everything frozen on Earth is melting. The great ice sheet of the Arctic is reduced by more than half. The oceans are about 30% more acidic than they were 30 years ago because the chemistry of seawater changes as it absorbs carbon from the atmosphere. And because warm air holds more water vapor than cold, the atmosphere is about 5% wetter than it was 40 years ago. That's astonishingly large change.
There's more energy coming in and being absorbed by the Earth than there is heat being radiated to space, which is exactly what we expected, because as we add greenhouse gases to the atmosphere, it traps heat. Now we can measure that, and that's the basis by which we can prove that the human-made impacts on atmospheric composition are the primary cause of the climate change that we're observing.
Shall we work through the numbers? There are 3, and they're easy. The first one's 2 degrees. That's how much the world has said it would be safe to let the planet warm.
In political terms, it's the only thing that anybody's agreed to. Some of you may remember that climate summit in Copenhagen. There was only one number in the final 2-page voluntary accord that people signed. Only one number in it, 2 degrees. Every signatory pledged to make sure the temperature wouldn't rise above that. The EU, Japan, Russia, China, countries that make their money selling oil like the United Arab Emirates, the most conservative, recalcitrant, reluctant countries on earth, even the United States. If the world officially believes anything about climate change, it's that 2 degrees is too much.
Second number, scientists have calculated how much carbon we could pour into the atmosphere and have a reasonable chance of staying below 2 degrees. They say about 565 more gigatons. A gigaton is 1 billion tons. That's not a perfect chance. That's worse odds than Russian roulette, you know.
It sounds like it should be a lot. It is a lot. 565 billion tons of CO2. The problem is we pour 30 billion tons a year in now, and it goes up 3% a year. Do the math, and it's about 15 years before we go past that threshold. So that's sobering news. But the scary number is the third number.
The third number was the important one and the new one, and it came from a team of financial analysts in the United Kingdom. And what they did was sit down with all the annual reports and SEC filings and things and figure out how much carbon the world's fossil fuel industry, how much they had already in their reserves. And that number turned out to be 2,795 gigatons worth of carbon. 5 times as much as the most conservative governments on Earth think would be safe to pour into the atmosphere. It's not even close. I mean, it's 5 times more. And once you know that number, then you understand the essence of this problem.